Before we dive in to tell a little bit of a story, a success story of the DC Wharf using data, I want to take a minute to introduce myself, my colleague John that's here with me today, and a little background about Sensei. So to get started, my name is Devin Boson. I am the Director of Population and Migration Products for Sensei, and I've been with our company for about 6 years. John, do you want to take a second to introduce yourself, and then we can talk a little bit about Sensei?
Yeah, hi guys. My name is John Liggett. I'm the head of data partnerships for Sensei and our broader parent organization, Rushmore Labs. I just want to pause here for a second and make sure we have enough people online that are in and give people a second to get logged in and whatnot before we get started on the agenda. But I'll turn it over to Devin once we got the queue that we got enough people in.
Thanks, John.
I think we're gonna wait another minute. We have some stragglers coming in.
Okay.
Sounds good.
How are we doing, Abby?
We still have some people coming in right now, so let's plan to start at 9:03.
Okay, sounds good.
No problem. We'll sit tight.
Awesome.
All right, I think we've gotten some people into the webinar now, so I think we're good to get started. Devin, if you want to. Again, hey guys, this is John Liggett. I'm the head of data partnerships for Sensei and Rushmore Labs, which is our parent organization here. Happy to have you all guys here. I'll let Devin reintroduce herself. Oh, we got new people in.
Thanks, John. As John mentioned, my name is Devin Boson. I am the Director of Population and Migration Products for Sensei. And today what we want to do is take the moment to tell a little bit about the DC Wharf from the perspective of utilizing data. For those who don't know, Sensei is a brand that sits under Rushmore Labs, and we are owned by Koch Industries. We are a population intelligence platform, which is how we, correlate over into the real estate space. We work with clients across the financial services and private equity, commercial real estate underwriting, and due diligence in order to redefine market perspectives using data. So just to dive in a little bit, we'll talk to you a little bit about what we have planned for today's webinar, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So first, we're going to recenter ourselves around the DC Wharf for those who are not familiar with it. We'll spend some time talking about the redevelopment of the Wharf, why we think this area was positioned for success, and then we will triangulate all of that to look ahead to other future opportunities that exist across the U.S. John and I really hope to keep things informal during this conversation today, so please continue to post any questions that you might have into our feed, and we'll be moderating that where we will pull questions in as they're relevant, but we will also hold some for the end to make sure that we are able to spend time diving deep on any questions that come up during our presentation today. So to go ahead and dive in on the Wharf, when we are talking about the Wharf, we are looking at an area that's southwestern waterfront of the Washington, D.C. area. So it's going to be this 1 mile stretch along the Washington Channel right here that leads up to the tidal basins. For those who are unfamiliar with Washington, D.C., it's going to be west of the U.S. Capitol, which is right here, and it sits just below the National Mall and all of the monuments in museums. The Wharf has a really rich history, and we're going to spend a couple minutes diving into that history and how we got to where we are today with one of the most successful redevelopments across the city. It opened in 1805 as one of the longest continuously operating fish wharfs across the U.S. But since then, it's gone through multiple major redevelopments. Today, the Wharf is a mixed-use community that brings together residential, office, retail, entertainment with the anthem, and other cultural activities. If we look at the Wharf through time, we're going to highlight a few different areas where we see how that translates to where we are today. So first, as I mentioned before, the Wharf opened in 1805. Today, it is the longest operating fisherman's wharf across the United States. But starting in 1945, the southwestern waterfront area, particularly around the Wharf, started going through phases of revitalization. And this was part of the Redevelopment Act that was passed in the District of Columbia in 1945. By 1960, skipping ahead a little bit, only 1% of Southwest's original buildings remained. And then by 2003, the mayor at the time had asked that they revitalize the area and bring back in arts, entertainment, and residents to the area. Some of the reasons around this revitalization was that by the early 2000s, there was economic stagnation, there were higher vacancy rates, aging infrastructure, and this part of the district was generally perceived as being unsafe. By 2006, an initial developer was selected to redesign and bring the Wharf back to life. But because of the uniqueness of the Wharf itself, there was a public-private partnership between the District of Columbia and the Wharf. There was also a federal aspect as well, in which two different bills were brought to Congress in order to transfer ownership of some of the waterfront space over to the District of Columbia in order to make sure that the redevelopment could happen. There were also zoning changes that happened during this time that allowed for redevelopment of waterfront spaces, as well as zoning that allowed for high dense commercialization of some of those things that we talked about earlier, being office, retail, residential, and entertainment. Finally, by 2014, almost 10 years after a developer was selected, they broke ground on the Wharf, and it was conducted in two different phases. The first phase opened in 2017. The second phase opened towards the end of 2022. And then just recently, in mid-2025, all of those loans were fully repaid. At this point, I'm going to hand it back over to John as he talks a little bit around the funding of the Wharf.
So there was a unique bond issue that was relatively small. It was $145 million that literally prepared the groundwork for the next $3 billion or more that went into private funding to go into all the projects at the Wharf. This bond was unique in that it used incremental tax revenues, both sales and property taxes generated by the wharf, not the property taxes that were already coming in. This bond, it was 145 million, 113 million, pretty much went to infrastructure upgrades, things like utilities, seawalls, just preparing the groundwork so that commercial developers could come in and develop the area. The rest of the money went into a capitalized interest account. You can think about this as money that was put aside to pay interest before the properties and buildings started generating increased tax revenue. And then another debt service reserve fund that was set aside for after the project was operating, but before maybe it was fully up to speed in terms of tax generation, to make sure that the bond didn't default in that transition period. So the debt service reserve was kind of like a credit enhancement, essentially. Why is this unique, this bond that was issued? It was kind of cool because there was not any need for an increase in property taxes or sales taxes to kick off the project. Everything was kind of done based on the increased revenue that the new project would generate. And so that way you weren't kind of taxing the people that were there, in a sense, to attract more people to the area. It was done through public-private partnerships, right? The Wharf success drove tax revenues much higher. So it did exactly what they needed to do. And they were able to retire the debt well ahead of schedule, freeing up a lot of the tax revenue for the district's general funds. As of today, most recently in April 2025, the owner of the Wharf is PSP Investments, a Canadian pension fund manager. They were originally they were a minority partner in the project in 2014, and acquired the rest of the stake from the original developers, Hoffman Associates and Madison Marquette. I will turn it over. No, actually, I've got another slide. I apologize. So again, as Devin mentioned earlier, the project was done in two phases. Phase one, March 2014 to October 2017, included residential units like the Encanto, 250,000 square feet of office space. They built the Canopy, a Hilton hotel there, a lot of retail space. They built a cultural space called the Anthem, which the first band to play there, if anyone's interested, was the Foo Fighters. And this was about $1.4 billion in private investment went in to develop these buildings. And then phase two launched in March of 2019, unfortunately, probably right before COVID hit, but was completed in October of 22. And this included more retail space, more office buildings, but also more housing. So the Tides apartment and the Amaris condominiums were there. They expanded the marina and added park space. There's kind of a secret to the Wharf that locals love to talk about, and maybe I'll hand that over to Devin to talk about the amazing parking facilities at the Wharf.
I don't know if I would consider this something that locals love to talk about, but it's something I love to talk about. So underneath the Wharf, for those who are familiar with DC, parking is sparse and limited, but I would say one of the best kept secrets about the Wharf is that it has a massive parking garage with over 1,000 spots open to the public below it. And they're all interconnected. So it is one of my best kept secrets. If you're going to see the cherry blossoms in April, that you park underneath the Wharf and you take the 5-minute walk over to the tidal basins. And so now I've made a plug for DC's tourism, I suppose, but it is excellent. Whenever the Wharf first opened, there was only one parking garage. There were articles that were disputing, the limited parking in the area. And I would say where we ended at the end of 2022 is one of the best and easiest to get in and out of parking garages across the district. I think one other element here that we didn't touch on yet that makes the Wharf really unique is that when we talked about its first major redevelopment in the early 1960s, we talked about the displacement of buildings as well as residents during that time, leaving only 1% of the existing infrastructure. because of the need to revitalize aging infrastructure and high vacancy rates, there was actually no displacement at the time. And what resulted was a series of residential units that were mixed between rentals and owning through condominiums that brought in over 1,200 new residential units into the district during a time in which supply is already limited. So it was a really great opportunity to revitalize not only the Southwest waterfront, but to also bring in additional housing where it was badly needed. As part of that housing, and we'll dive into it more because we are going to talk a little bit about how with Sensei, you can drill down to the multifamily level. As part of the housing, though, there was the DC's inclusionary zone, which is the requirement that all new builds across the district offer some degree of affordable housing. So this was really targeted not only at revitalization across the Southwest waterfront, but also versatility. I think that's part of what has made the phase 1 and phase 2 so successful in its opening. So at this point, we're going to shift over into talking about why the DMV as a whole was already positioned for success here. So I think, we have to address the elephant in the room here to start. The DC metro area is the seat of the US federal government, and that is the largest employer in the region and historically has created economic stability across the District of Columbia, parts of Virginia, and parts of Maryland. Now, I know with DOGE, there has been some uncertainty around the impact on federal jobs, particularly around the district and what that would mean for life and vitality across the metro. But so far, we're continuing to see signs of economic stability, especially when we look at Sensei's data that uncovers migration at the individual level in and out of the district. I think, there's probably still some uncertainty that exists around that, but we'll keep monitoring it and see how that changes over the course of the next 6 to 12 months. In addition to having the federal government, there's robust technology sectors, consulting, law firms, nonprofits, defense contracting that continues to ensure steady occupancy across office buildings, as well as homes and rentals in the area. And one of the last notes just here is that historically, they've had really strict zoning laws that's limited new commercial developments in order to mitigate any impact from economic downturn across the nation and keep those vacancy rates low. I think we mentioned a little bit about the affordable housing, but part of those inclusionary zones is that new developers are getting affordability bonuses when they go in to build new developments, which means that they're allowed to build more dense properties or more units than they otherwise would have been with the existing zoning regulations. So there are incentives now as well to bring not only more housing into the district, but more affordable housing as well. And that kind of gets around some of these stricter zoning laws. But, we brought all of you guys here to tell a story about success of the Wharf using data. So let's start diving into some of the data. There are 3 different areas that we want to compare during this. The first is going to be the DC metro area. Again, that's going to be parts of Maryland, Virginia, and the District of Columbia. Then you have the Southwest waterfront, which does encompass part of the DC Wharf. Again, it's that 1-mile stretch along the Washington Channel. And then the last piece is going to be the Wharf alone. Utilizing Sensei, we are able to drill down to any polygon. We can take a CBSA, or we can use the opportunity to draw custom areas, which has made this a great opportunity to get hyper local to really understand how demographics and migration trends are showing us success.
And just to weigh in here, this is not census data. This is based upon our database of 270 million, individuals with demographics attached and, recording up to 25 million moves in any given year. So this is what allows us to dive in and get very granular on our demographic data.
Yeah. And on that note, I can just say we just released the second quarter of 2025 a few days ago. So we're going to show you data as timely as it gets in the market in terms of migration trends. So Want to take the Wharf in focus a little bit before we zoom back out to do a comparison across the district, Southwest Waterfront, and the Wharf. The Wharf, when we look across these areas, it's one of the only areas across the metro that has continued to have positive net migration every single year since it opened to residents in 2017. It's mitigated impact of COVID. We are seeing so far it's resilient to any sort of federal cuts in jobs. So it's really proving to be a very strong, stable place for residents. The median income inside the Wharf as well is significantly higher than the rest of the Southwest Waterfront. At the end of the second quarter of 2025, we saw the median was around $185,000, which is about 50% higher than the rest of the Southwest Waterfront. And then the last thing to call out, it's an extremely educated populace. So about 96% of that population has a bachelor's degree or higher. And that, again, is going to be 15% higher than the Southwest Waterfront and 10% more than the rest of the metro area. So all in all, these signs at the population level are showing continued signs of stability, success, popularity among residents, etc. And so I want to zoom back out, though, and look at what we mean whenever we're talking about net migration. As John mentioned, with our Sensei data, we are able to look at individual moves from one address to another at a very granular level. And then we're able to aggregate those up to look at populations on a whole. So this chart here is showing the net migration trends comparing the Wharf to the Southwest Waterfront and the DC metro area. And what you're seeing here is that the Wharf continues to remain positive, where you're seeing impacts from COVID and other external factors hitting both the DC metro area as well as the Southwest Waterfront. Couple things that I think are worth calling out here. We are starting to see the DC metro area, like other large metro areas across the country, start to return to some sort of parity or stabilization coming out of COVID. Again, there's still uncertainty there, so it might take a quarter or two longer, but we are seeing net migration in the district or in the metro area generally begin to stabilize. As far as the Southwest Waterfront goes, you are seeing areas of really big inflows that are counteracting outflows, but those are all driven by what's happening in the DC Wharf. So if I look across the chart, you see positive net migration for the Southwest Waterfront right after we open that first phase of the Wharf. There's a drop here largely attributed to the COVID times and individuals wanting to move out to areas that have more space. And we were in an area of in a time of really low interest rates. People were looking to buy more than rent. But then you see the Wharf opens its second phase again here in 2022. At the end of 22, leading into 2023, you both see another spike for the Wharf early 2023, and you see the Southwest Waterfront does have positive migration right during that opening period as well. So during that time period, we saw population in the Southwest Waterfront area grow by about 30%. That's really largely driven by the impacts of the Wharf's redevelopment. If we take a look at this from another angle and look at the income, what we are able to see is that over 80% of the Wharf residents have a median household income greater than $100,000. However, what's really interesting and gets back to these ideas of inclusionary zones, where about 30% of all housing units in the Wharf are marked for affordable housing, you do see that there are residents across all income buckets, suggesting that this incorporation of affordable units has been really successful for the Wharf. With Sensei data, we can also take a look at who are these individuals that are moving into the area. So up until this point, we've been giving you guys stories of success based on current snapshots in the market, current population snapshots and what's going on at the general level. But with Sensei, we can also take a look at not only what the population looks like, but how that's being changed by individuals moving in and out of a population. So if we look at median inflow income since the completion of the second phase, the income for the Wharf is about almost 25% higher than the rest of the Southwest Waterfront. and it's almost 40% higher than the DC metro area.
And
So
those are people moving in, right, Devin?
yeah, these are people moving in. So,
Yeah.
the Wharf is continuing to check boxes. It's checked the affordability box. It's checked the sustained population growth box. It's checked sustained income growth. And so all these signs are pointing to not only was the development side of the project hugely successful and the funding side hugely successful, it continues to draw populations in that will create an ecosystem for the commercial real estate market there that I think is really exceptional. John, should we switch over to multifamily outlook now?
Yeah, that looks good. We can look at this. Is really good. This kind of gets into the power of the granularity of our data, being able to focus on individual properties, not just areas in our analysis.
Yeah, so I think there's a few notable properties that were opened that we talked about in phase 1 and phase 2. So we chose just a selection of 3 buildings that we wanted to dive in on to see what was going on. So we decided to take a deeper look at the Tides, which is a very large apartment community, the Banks, and then Encanto. Aside from the architecture here being so beautiful and on the water, they've done an excellent job in creating amenities in that inclusionary zoning that are bringing populations in that are staying. They're creating this sense of stickiness. We're seeing low out migration from these buildings, so not a lot of turnover, and really good signs of economic stability, both in terms of population growth, education, as well as income. So just looking at the income chart that we have here, we decided to take a look at what the median income was of the tenants that were living across 3 different buildings within the Wharf. Again, we're using Sensei data to build all of this out, so we're getting hyper granular at this point. So if you look at the Tides has a median family income of $165,000. The Banks comes in just after that at about $180,000. And then the Encanto comes in about $192,000. So the Encanto is slightly higher than that median income that we're seeing across the rest of residents living in the Wharf. On the other hand, the Tides, it has the lowest median income, which is still above the DC metro area. But what we are seeing is that this is very indicative of the idea that the Tides has the highest share of affordable housing units across these 3 buildings. So it is really driving in a versatile population in terms of demographic makeup.
I'll just say, just wanted everyone, sometimes people get confused. This is individual level income data. This is not household income data. So a lot of times people look at household versus individual. This is individual level income data, not the household.
Yeah. So I think at this point, we've really highlighted areas where the Wharf has stood out as a model for success. It's, a very large public-private partnership that included the federal government, which is unique to the District of Columbia. We've taken a look at how to creatively go about infrastructure and rebuilding new residential communities. And then we've drilled down onto the demographic data. So at this point, I think it's relevant to think about, it's nice to know what happened in the Wharf, but how can we take those learnings and apply those outside of the Wharf to identify new areas of opportunity that could be as successful as the Wharf? So we did a little dive into Sensei. I'm going to ask John to run it from here as we talk about what we call lookalikes inside of our Sensei platform.
So I kind of think lookalikes is one of the coolest features that we've built across the whole platform. The idea behind lookalikes is like you've got a market that did very well for you, whether that's a multifamily project or a retail store, right? And you want to find other locations that maybe have similar characteristics to the places that you've found success in, right? And so we built a model. Essentially, it's a machine learning model called a classification model that goes across and looks to find similar areas at either the CBSA level or the county level or the zip code level to say like, hey, I really like this zip code. Can you find me other zip codes that look like it from a demographic standpoint, from a percentage that are renters versus homeowners, population growth, income growth, investability scores. It takes all of these things into account, and then kind of tells you like what are other areas like the one you're looking at, right? And so here what we did was we looked at the zip code, for instance, that the Wharf is in, and we said find all the zip codes that look like the Wharf, right? And further we can refine that. So here we just said California. Find me something in California that looks like the Wharf. And you see that it comes up with a couple of examples here: the Embarcadero area along Fisherman's Wharf in San Francisco, and the financial district in San Francisco, right? And so this is important because the next thing we get to is kind of like, what are the other opportunities that look like the Wharf did or does? And so this is like a cool feature. We use it all the time to help find other interesting markets. If you really want to think about how you can look at lookalike markets for investment opportunities, you can kind of like use it to drill down and say, where do I want to put elbow grease into a market? Where do I want to go source deals? Where should I be looking in the US, or where should I be looking in my target area? If you're more of a regionally focused developer or investor, you can define these areas to be like, I only want it within 200 miles of my existing property, right? And it'll give you a list of lookalikes that look like that just in that 200 miles, or you can do it nationwide. So that's lookalike markets. It's a cool feature. It's available at the property level as well. So if you have a property that you like, we do lookalike properties, right? So one multifamily building that has done very well for you, you can go find other multifamily buildings that look like it in a market. And we can go to the next slide. So two developments kind of stood out to us as having some features similar to the Wharf that are in development right now that may be worth looking into from an investment opportunity. The first one is the Jersey City Bayfront development. So in many ways, the Bayfront resembles the Wharf. It had underutilized land that was historically used for things like old industrial warehousing, manufacturing activities. It had some environmental issues that needed to be remediated. Most of the environmental remediation was completed in 2009, which kind of opened up this vacant land in Jersey City on the Hackensack River, within a train commute to New York City, to be revitalized and to be opened up and provide more housing and retail to the area. Jersey City, if you look at this area of Jersey City, and this is using kind of the Sensei data to do it, you see that Hudson County, the county that it's in, has a median income of 93,000. The Polygon, which is like a more granular space near this development, has a much lower income of 67,000. Both areas have experienced net migration outflows, but you see that the area around this development has a much lower education percentage of people with a bachelor degree compared to the county overall. So it's in an area that people know is growing and has a need for housing and has going through some changes for sure, similar to what Hoboken went through maybe in the past decade. Jersey City it's building out from there, and so they are building this large multi-use area. The city granted approvals for the first phase in July of 22. And in May of 25, there was a groundbreaking ceremony where they're building the first 6-story apartment unit building there with ground floor retail, on-site daycare. They're building a community facility. A lot of things that are similar to the Wharf, trying to create a space that has its own neighborhood, its own community, its own entertainment, its own charter schools, for instance. And the idea is eventually there's going to be 8,000 new homes in the area, with about 35% of those designated for affordable housing. The only problem I have with the picture of this facility actually is that I'm not sure there's going to be sailboats going up the Hackensack River. So just want to warn you that maybe you don't want to be the first bid on any marina expansion ideas here. If you've ever been to the Hackensack River, I'm not sure I'd want to be selling boats in it, but you know, it is what it is. The second project that we were looking at that has some similar characteristics, but maybe not exactly, is the Embarcadero improvement in San Francisco. This is not like Bayfront or Wharf in the sense that they're not planning to build new housing or new office space or new retail. It's really more of a green space improvement where there's a lot of money going into to improve the Fisherman Wharf area, to create more green lanes, improve the green lanes that are there. This is a huge commuting lane into and out of San Francisco, but it may have positive effects for the real estate that's nearby, right? So that area of San Francisco, if you have improved parks, if you have improved access for things like scooters and bicycles and whatnot, there is a lot of kind of older real estate in the area that may see improved occupancy rates and rental rates from the fact that they're improving the green space. I want to say like Lower Manhattan went through something similar to this, you know, where they improved the Battery and then, you know, they made the Chelsea Pier area and all of that much nicer, and it attracted more investment to the real estate nearby it. And so that's kind of how we see if it's well executed, the Embarcadero project could improve real estate values and the desirability of the area around it.
I think one thing to call out in both of these is both the metro area that Bayfront is in, as well as San Francisco. Those are both gateway markets similar to Washington, D.C. And I think the common theme we're seeing here is revitalization around large urban hubs to bring populations back in. And I think it's very well, I think you can really draw that conclusion based on what you're seeing in out migration from these areas over the last couple of ways is city planners together with developers are thinking about how can we bring people back and what are the lifestyle traits that we need to be offering in order to create these vibrant communities. So I think it's so interesting that we can find the Embarcadero area right in our lookalikes. I think that speaks a lot to the value there. But I think these are both unique development opportunities. So just to wrap up here, I think, throughout our conversation, we've been mentioning Sensei and the power behind the Sensei data. Everything that we showed you here in terms of demographic and population insights have all come from Sensei. It's a platform offering the industry's most precise migration trends. We have demographic data, including dozens of different touch points ranging from education or household size, family makeup, etc., all the way down to property level details in real estate. You saw John and I, we were talking about drawing polygons throughout this conversation. We are able to really dive deep down into a single multifamily property or draw a polygon around an area, such as a trade area, to get an understanding of what is the population makeup and what trends are indicating future success there. All of this is built on top of our database of 270 million adults, and we refresh it every quarter. So you guys saw data that was as most recent as the second quarter of this year. In December, we'll have the third quarter of 2025 released. We provide our clients with access to a platform, or there's access to large data streams as well. And most often we're working with your investment analysts, acquisition teams, a lot of market researchers who are trying to understand market trends for commercial real estate, as well as developers and brokers. So please take the time to visit our site. If you guys have any questions at this point, I'm happy to open the floor up to questions. But it was great having everyone here today.
Awesome. Devin, if I could just chime in, I did notice that there was a question in the chat here. It was actually just recently, Are there any new features or upcoming features within the Sensei platform that you are most excited about in the next couple of months?
Yes, but John and I may have different perspectives, so I'll share mine and then he can share his. This summer we launched Gen AI. So rather than having to dig through the platform yourself to find insights, while it's intuitive and easy to use, there's now also a Gen AI function where you are able to prompt our AI tool to give you market summaries, compare markets. You're able to compare metro areas to zip codes to get some really refined insights and conclusions there. So I'm really excited about that. I think the other one is we are working really hard for our fourth quarter to release occupation data at the individual level as well. So those are the two big items on my list that I'm really proud of that we're getting ready to come forward with to really change the way Sensei pulls together insights. John, anything different from you?
No, I think we have a continuous improvement process here at Sensei, and we're always looking for new data sets. It's going to complement the data that we already have, right? We multi-source a lot of this data from a lot of different locations, and occupation is a huge one, I think, that we get a lot of questions about. So I think that will be super useful to add into, kind of these market deep dives, and perhaps in the future enhancing our rental data to really understand rental rates at a more granular level. That is in production right now, or not production, but in development right now. And so I think it's going to be an evolving platform, but the idea behind it is like, you come in, you find a market, and kind of all about the people who live there, right? We're really focused on the demand side for real estate, not so much the supply side. We're working on several partnerships now that's just going to enhance the value of the platform quite a bit.
Yeah, it's been a really exciting half year, I would say. There's a lot coming in the last quarter. So
yeah.
Thanks, Daniel. Great. Well, I think, we're just about at time. Thank you everyone for joining. We will be sure to share the handout after. And stay tuned for when our next webinar is.
Thank you.